Republican former senator is sort of behind closed doors providing a masterclass on corruption. This is Norm Coleman. And after leaving office, he apparently went on to become one of Saudi Arabia's most influential lobbyists here in DC, while representing wealthy individuals and groups that have provided millions of dollars in donations to Republican politicians. And we want to give you some of the details of what he's been doing behind closed doors from some great reporting by Responsible Statecraft. Say last year, he had a request for 30 Republican congressional staffers. So this is how you do the lobbying. You contact their offices to get through them to their representatives. Coleman had helped many of their bosses' campaigns in his role atop an organization that raised and spent over $165 million in just the 2020 election cycle. Maddening amounts of money. So he wrote to these 30 different offices. At this time, the kingdom would appreciate if your member of Congress would publicly welcome this step and call out the Houthis for their continuous obstruction of the political process. So this is in regards to an, at that point, Saudi ceasefire initiative in Yemen that the rebels ultimately rejected. They demanded that any such agreement would require the Saudis to fully lift the blockade that was currently in effect around Yemen, which has contributed to literally hundreds of thousands of deaths. But while that was one request that he made on behalf of Saudi Arabia, it was hardly the only one. He wrote over 1,000 emails to House and Senate staffers in 2021 and 2022 as part of his paid work for Saudi Arabia. He and several of his colleagues at his law firm are registered as foreign agents of the kingdom. So credit to them for actually registering as foreign agents. That's almost novel in this day and age. The emails, as well as the details of $175,000 per month contract between the law firm and Saudi Arabia, are all contained in filings that have been submitted to the DOJ. To put it in perspective, the total amount of lobbying that was spent by Saudi Arabia, it was $21 million just last year. And we know that there's a lot of money in politics. Nobody's surprised by that. But the huge amount of money that he is responsible for, the huge amount of money coming from just one country that could hardly be counted as one of our major allies, that is a lot of money that can buy you a lot of influence. And who is to say how it affected our political outcomes, how it affected what legislation was written or not, passed or didn't, vetoes that were done or not? What can you buy with $21 million? What do you guys think?
So this is a great example of basically money laundering that happens in DC. So it's not technically money laundering, but what the foreign governments do is they give money to lobbyists like Norm Coleman, and then Norm Coleman takes different money from other donors and funnels it to the politicians, right? So they're getting money from different sources here and then pushing them out through different vehicles to the politicians. So when Norm Coleman writes them a letter saying the kingdom would like this, the Republicans know if I don't do what the kingdom wants, it's gonna cost me a ton of money. So look, let me give you guys scale here, okay? So, and let me explain these two groups, all right? He helped found the Congressional Leadership Fund, Norm Coleman did. So that's their super PAC, okay? Where he serves as a chair, according to a current biography on his law firm profile. And Coleman also serves as a chair of the American Action Network. American Action Network has given $94 million to Republicans since 2011. When somebody gives you $94 million, when they write you a letter saying, I would like this or the kingdom would like that, you pay attention. But that's nothing compared to the Congressional Leadership Fund, which he's the chair of. They gave $165 million in just 2020 alone. So they are massive, massive donors to the Republican politicians. So when Norm Coleman writes you a letter, you pay attention. That's your boss. And Norm Coleman's boss is Saudi Arabia. And he is over the top fawning of Saudi Arabia. He says things as absurd as that the Saudi government is the model of moderate Islam. Moderate Islam, their penal code is nearly identical to ISIS. I'm not exaggerating. They chopped up a political opponent and a journalist here in America. They chopped him to pieces and carried him out on luggage. And after that, Norm Coleman says, model of moderate Islam, because it's all about the bribes, the bribes, the bribes. And yet mainstream media thinks Norm Coleman's totally fine. I remember when look, we're ancient. We've been around 20 years. I remember covering Norm Coleman's race against Al Franken. And in that case, Norm Coleman's been corrupt his whole life. He had a no-show job for his wife. There was hilarious quotes about people where his wife was theoretically an employee. They're like, who's that? So we never seen her here, right? And she was getting paid a ton of money through someone who wanted political favors and said, well, technically it's not going to Norm Coleman. Technically it's going to his wife. It's like that mob has those no-show jobs. That's what this was. So, but that entire time, all the way through to today, Norm Coleman is a very legitimate, upstanding member of Washington. He is very respectable, very credible, and just a wonderful, upstanding citizen. No, he's a crook. He's a crook who facilitates money laundering and bribes to politicians. But the mainstream media would never tell you that because it would be politically incorrect. Republicans would get mad at them for exposing corruption. By the way, so would corporate Democrats.
And that's it, because that the corporatists at both parties, same coin, different sides. I mean, this is sickening, absolutely sickening. If you have more money, you get more voice. Even if you are a foreign country, it's who's your daddy? Who's your mama? That's what's going on here. And I am so glad that we continue to cover stories like this because people got to wake up. We cannot be complicit in our own damn demise. And this is what is happening and has happened in the past, continues to happen right now. This is really some sick stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, of course, the Republicans just voted down a bill that wouldn't end money. All it would do was just disclose donors above $10,000. You want to give $9,500? They think you're middle class, or you're fine. You don't have to be disclosed. Above $10,000, they're like, no way, no way. You think we're gonna let you find out who's bribing us? No. And
wait, Cenk, you mean all of the Republicans voted against it except for the anti-elite, right-wing populist Republican politicians, right? Because surely they would want the disclosure.
Surely they would, John, and that's why none of them voted for this, because there are no populists in the Republican Party. They're all frauds. They're all liars. They're serving these giant corporations, these foreign governments, and billionaires. Every one of them, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, they all said, no, I want the bribes to be undisclosed. That money has to be kept hidden from the American people. They're such huge liars. By the way, don't get me wrong. It's not like the Democrats meant it. They put that bill up because they knew the Republicans were gonna vote no.
I said, knew it was gonna fail.
Yeah, and look, I gotta say this last thing. So, Nina, we talked about this in the context of your race. So we had a group called Democratic Majority for Israel, just flat out says it in their name. We're not for America, we're for Israel, okay?
That's right.
And they put in millions into that race. And then when we said, hey, wait a minute, it looks like they're trying to help a foreign government, because Israel, I looked at a map of Cleveland, couldn't find Israel.
Good night.
And the press yelled at us instead of the goddamn lobbyists. I mean, right. And we said it at the time. We said it doesn't matter if it's Israel or Saudi Arabia. They're all buying our politicians.
Right, insert said country. And you don't give a damn that 50% of the children in Cleveland are living in poverty. They don't care that Big Mama, Big Daddy can't take care of their families because inflation is so high. They don't care that the erosion of the child tax credit, not just erosion, just flat out disappeared, has a profound impact on the people who live in not only Cleveland, but the greater Cleveland area. You think they give a damn about that? No, not at all. But when you stand up and advocate for your constituents, as you just said, Jenkins, you went through similar stuff, then we get shouted down. What about Cleveland? You know, this is, again, we, the American people, must stop being complicit in our own damn demise. We got to stand up and fight back against this. More money should not be speech. I know we got to deal with Citizens United, but in the meantime, in between time, we should have some righteous indignation over this stuff. And they doing it in the broad open daylight. You know why? Because they know it will not be any consequences or repercussions for their actions.
I gotta say one last thing. John just read you the stat. Did you see that anywhere else in the mainstream press? That 370,000 people died in Yemen because of the Saudi blockade. So you hear about all the deaths in Ukraine, and you should, and I'm glad they're covering that. But Russia is not an ally. So when they invade Ukraine, oh my God, the civilians, good. Saudi Arabia is an ally. In other words, they bought all of our corrupt, crooked politicians, right? So they invade Yemen, kill 370,000 people on the blockade alone. Where's the press? Where's the dead kids on the TV? Where's all the dead bodies? Where's all the stories of outrage? Where's all the stories of the Yemeni people heroically fighting back, which they have, just like the Ukrainians have? Nowhere to be found, because the media doesn't do news. They're in the manufacturing consent business. Noam Chomsky wrote this decades ago, and he was 100% right. The point of news for corporate media is not at all news. It's marketing for corporations and foreign governments and corruption.